There are moments on live television that you cannot manufacture, cannot script, cannot engineer through production planning or segment prep or any of the hundreds of calculated decisions that go into making a show like First Take feel like it is operating at the edge of controlled chaos rather than in the comfortable middle of it. The moments I'm talking about are the accidental ones, the ones where the machinery of professional media breaks down just enough to let something real slip through. The ones where a person who knows something says that something out loud before the part of their brain responsible for professional discretion can catch the part of their brain that was just answering a question honestly. I have watched a lot of live television. I have seen a lot of those moments. What happened on First Take this morning, what I watched unfold in real time, leaning closer and closer to my screen as the implications of what had just been said became clear, was the best version of that kind of moment I have ever witnessed. And it started, of all things, with Ryan Clark simply answering a question about the Los Angeles Lakers. Hey, what's up everyone? Real quick before we get into everything, that like button is literally what determines if this reaches hundreds or thousands of fans. Takes 1 second, but makes a huge impact on the channel's growth. Just smash that like button right now. It's the easiest thing you can do, but honestly the biggest way to support this content. Every single like pushes this further, so hit it now. Let me build the full scene for you before I get to the slip itself, because the context of how the conversation arrived at that point is essential to understanding why the slip landed the way it did. The show had a special guest in the studio, Ryan Clark, former NFL safety, current ESPN analyst, a man with the kind of network inside the sports world that comes from years of professional relationships built at the highest level of competition. Clark was there to discuss off-season priorities across the league, which is the kind of broad topic that gives a guest room to move, room to opine, room to speak with authority across multiple franchises without getting pinned to any specific claim. Molly had been working through a segment about Western Conference teams and their most pressing needs heading into the summer. The Lakers had come up naturally. The conversation had been crisp and professional. Stephen A. making his usual arguments about Los Angeles' offensive needs, Shannon offering the counterpoint about roster construction philosophy, Clark nodding along and adding the occasional observation from his own perspective. And then Molly asked Ryan Clark directly, where do the Lakers need to focus most this offseason? And Clark leaned forward the way he does when he is about to make a point he feels confident about. And he started talking about the Lakers' offensive ceiling, about how the team had the defensive infrastructure and the playmaking, but lacked a genuine high-volume scorer who could be trusted to produce in playoff-level environments without manufacturing everything from scratch. He was making the argument cleanly and specifically, and everyone in the studio was nodding, and it was good television in the regular way that good First Take segments are good television. And then he said it. He said, well, from what I'm hearing, that's already being taken care of. And he paused for a fraction of a second in the way people pause when they realize mid-sentence that they are about to walk through a door they did not intend to open. And then he said, with Michael Porter Jr., the studio froze. I do not use that word metaphorically. I mean it in the precise, literal sense that every person in that room went completely, simultaneously still at the same instant. Molly's expression shifted from engaged moderator to something sharper, more alert, more focused. Shannon, who had been leaning back in his chair in the relaxed posture of someone listening rather than about to speak, moved forward in what felt like one fluid motion, both forearms coming down to the desk. And Stephen A. Smith's eyes, and I want to be specific about this because the eyes are the part I keep going back to, went wide in the particular way that communicates not surprise, but recognition. The look of a man who has just heard the confirmation of something he suspected but had not been able to confirm, and whose entire being has immediately organized itself around extracting as much additional information as possible before the moment closes. Molly said it first. She said, wait, what are you hearing? And her voice had the quality it gets when she is asking a question that she understands the significance of. Still professional, still composed, but carrying an urgency underneath the professionalism that was unmistakable. Ryan Clark's face changed in a way that was painful to watch in slow motion. You could see the exact moment the recognition hit him, the moment when the internal calculation of what he had just said caught up to the words that were already in the room, already in the air, already in front of cameras that were broadcasting to an audience that was now fully awake and paying complete attention. He pulled back slightly physically in his chair. And then he said, with a casualness that was so obviously constructed that it almost made the situation funnier than it was alarming. Oh, I mean, that's just speculation. You know how the summer goes. Teams are always exploring things. Dead silence. Stephen A. did not let it go. Stephen A. was never gonna let it go. Stephen A. Smith in that specific situation, a guest in his studio, a guest with clear connections inside the league, a guest who had just said something specific and sourced sounding, and had then tried to walk it back with an exit so flimsy it wouldn't hold up against the lightest pressure, as was exactly the version of Stephen A. that made him the most compelling television personality in sports media. He leaned across the desk, not aggressively, but with the particular energy of a man who has no intention of moving until he gets what he came for. And he said, Ryan. That didn't sound like speculation, that sounded like information. What are you hearing about Michael Porter Jr. and the Lakers? Clark laughed. It was the laugh of a man buying time while he figured out how much to say and how to say it, and everyone in the room knew it was that kind of laugh, which meant it bought him approximately no time at all. He said he had talked to some people, that there was real interest on both sides, that the Lakers had identified Michael Porter Jr. as a priority target, and the conversations with Brooklyn were further along than anything that had been reported publicly. And then he stopped. And he looked at the cameras, and you could see the exact moment he decided he had already said enough and was not going to say more regardless of how hard anyone pushed. Shannon said, further along how? Meaning what, specifically? Clark said, I've probably said more than I should have. Stephen A. said, you've definitely said more than you intended to, so you might as well finish. And Clark, to his credit and the enormous benefit of everyone watching, smiled and said, there's genuine communication happening between the Lakers front office and Brooklyn. That's real. Everything else I'll leave to people who are paid to report it. I want to walk through every layer of what Clark said, the intentional parts and the accidental parts, because there is a complete basketball story here that deserves serious analysis. Let me start with the foundational question. What does Michael Porter Jr. actually represent as an acquisition for the Los Angeles Lakers? And why would the Lakers front office have identified him as a priority target at this specific moment in time? Start with the offensive problem, because it is real and it is specific, and it has been real and specific for long enough that anyone paying attention should be tired of watching it recur. The Lakers have built a team around LeBron James's playmaking genius and around the defensive infrastructure that surrounds him, but the perimeter scoring has been inconsistent in the ways that matter most. In the second halves of playoff games, in the fourth quarters of elimination situations, in the moments when the defense has adjusted and the offense needs a player who can manufacture points from the three-point line without needing a specific action to be run for him. Michael Porter Jr. at his best is exactly that player. He averaged approximately 24 points per game for the Nets this season in a situation where he was the clear primary option, doing it with a shooting efficiency that most wings in the league cannot match, an elite three-point percentage on high volume, a scoring approach that combines catch-and-shoot ability with enough self-creation to be dangerous, even when the defense is paying attention to him specifically. Now put him next to LeBron James. I want you to hold that pairing in your head for a moment and think about what it actually creates on a basketball court. LeBron is one of the most effective creators of open threes for teammates in the history of the position. His ability to draw two defenders in the paint, to process the floor at full speed, and to deliver accurate passes to spot up shooters before the defense has recovered is the foundation of how the best LeBron-era offenses have worked. The catch-and-shoot three that MPJ provides, the ability to stand in the corner or at the wing, wait for the LeBron gravity to collapse the defense, and then knock down the shot that the collapse creates, is the specific offensive weapon that amplifies LeBron's playmaking impact the most. It is not complicated, it is not subtle. It is the most legible possible fit in basketball, and the fact that the Lakers have been unable to consistently find a player who can execute it at the level MPJ executes it explains a significant portion of their recent offensive struggles. Ryan Clark said interest on both sides. That phrase matters enormously because it addresses the question of why Brooklyn would be willing to move a player who is averaging 24 points a game and is their single most valuable asset. The Nets are in the middle of a genuine rebuild. They are not competing for anything meaningful this season or next season. They are accumulating draft capital and developing young talent and doing the things that rebuilding franchises do. In that context, carrying Michael Porter Jr. into the final year of his $40 million contract. A player who is clearly performing at a level well above what a rebuilding team needs from its best player, a player whose market value is at or near its ceiling right now. And not extracting maximum value from that player before he walks in free agency would be a front office failure. Brooklyn has every incentive in the world to move him before the deadline or this summer. The question has always been whether the asking price was manageable, and whether any team had the combination of assets and desperation and vision to pay it. And this brings me to the risk dimension, which I want to address directly, because it is real and it is significant, and anyone who tells you it isn't is not giving you a complete picture. Michael Porter Jr.'s injury history is not a footnote. It is a central feature of the analysis. He has had back surgeries. He has missed significant time in multiple seasons. His body has required the kind of medical intervention that, for a player who is now entering his physical prime at 27 years old, raises legitimate long-term questions about durability. The Lakers, if they make this move, are not just acquiring Michael Porter Jr. the scorer. They are acquiring Michael Porter Jr. the medical file, and that file has content in it that any reasonable front office evaluates with care. But, and I want to stay with this, but for a moment, the Lakers' timeline is not 3 years from now. The Lakers' timeline is now. LeBron James is in the final phase of his career. The window for competing at the highest level with LeBron as your primary star is not theoretical. It is immediate and it is closing. In that context, the risk calculation for an injury-prone scorer changes. You are not betting that MPJ stays healthy for 8 years. You are betting that he stays healthy for one postseason run. That is a meaningfully different bet. And at the offensive ceiling MPJ provides when he is healthy, the perimeter scoring volume, the shooting efficiency, the catch and shoot lethality next to LeBron's creation, it is a bet that a franchise competing with a closing window should be willing to make. Ryan Clark said real interest on both sides and further along than anything reported publicly. That language from a person with his connections is not nothing. It is the kind of language that appears in trade conversations when both parties have moved past exploratory dialogue and into actual framework discussion. It is the kind of language that 3 months from now will either look like the early signal of a deal that happened or the confirmed interest that preceded a deal that fell apart for cap or pick reasons. But the interest itself is real. Clark said so. And the basketball logic that would generate that interest is as clear as anything in the current offseason conversation. Michael Porter Jr. to the Lakers makes sense in the specific, measurable, film-supported way that the best offseason moves make sense before they happen. After the segment ended and they cut to commercial, I sat with the television still on and thought about what Ryan Clark had said and what he had almost not said and what he had said anyway. And I kept coming back to the same conclusion. Somewhere in a conversation between a Brooklyn executive and a Lakers executive, the name Michael Porter Jr. has been spoken out loud in the context of a real discussion. And Ryan Clark was in a room where that was known, and he forgot for one sentence on live television that he was not supposed to say it. And now we all know, and the Lakers offseason just became significantly more interesting than it was 20 minutes ago.